Welcome back to Mr. Smoot's Story Time. Today, we will finish the story of Hansel and Gretel and begin a new fascinating story called Matchbox Dreams. In this story, you will be introduced to three stuffed animals: Harper, Remy, and Millie. We don't have enough time today to finish the story, but today we will begin the story of Matchbox Dreams, and I hope you will come back next week to hear the conclusion. Every morning, the old woman would go out to the little cage and say, "Hansel, stick out your finger that I may feel if you are fat enough for eating." But Hansel, who knew how dim her old eyes were, always stuck a bone through the bars of his cage, which she thought was his finger, for she could not see. And when she felt how thin it was, she wondered very much why he did not get fat. However, as the weeks went on, and Hansel seemed not to get any fatter, she became impatient and said she could not wait any longer. "Go, Gretel," she cried to the maiden. "Be quick and draw water. Hansel may be fat or lean, I don't care. Tomorrow morning I mean to eat him." Oh, how the poor little sister grieved when she was forced to draw the water. And as the tears rolled down her cheeks, she exclaimed, "It would have been better to be eaten by wild beasts, or to have starved to death in the woods. Then we should have died together." "Stop your crying," cried the old woman. "It is not of the least use. No one will come to help you." Early in the morning, Gretel was obliged to go out and fill the great pot with water and hang it over the fire to boil. "We will bake some bread first. I have made the oven hot, and the dough is ready to be kneaded." Then she dragged poor little Gretel up to the oven door, under which the flames were burning fiercely, and said, "Creep in there and see if it is hot enough yet to bake bread." But if Gretel had obeyed her, she would have shut the poor child in and baked her for dinner instead of boiling Hansel. Gretel, however, guessed what she wanted to do and said, "I don't know how to get in through that narrow door." "Crazy goose," said the old woman. "Why, the oven door is quite large enough for me. Just look. I could get in myself." As she spoke, she stepped forward and pretended to put her head in the oven. A sudden thought gave Gretel unusual strength. She started forward, gave the old woman a push, which sent her right into the oven. Then she shut the iron door and fastened the bolt. Oh, how the witch did howl! It was quite horrible to hear her, but Gretel ran away, and therefore she was left to burn, just as she had left many poor children. And how quickly Gretel ran to Hansel, opened the door of his cage, and cried, "Hansel, Hansel, we are free, the old witch is dead." He flew like a bird out of his cage at those words as soon as the door was opened. And the children were so overjoyed that they ran into each other's arms and kissed each other with the greatest love. And now that there was nothing to be afraid of, they went back into the house. And while looking round the old witch's room, they saw an old oak chest, which they opened and found it full of pearls and precious stones and diamonds. "These are better than pebbles," said Hansel, and he filled his pockets as full as they would hold. "I will carry some home too," said Gretel, and she held out her apron, which held quite as much as Hansel's pockets. "We will go now," he said, "and get away as soon as we can from this enchanted forest." They had been walking for nearly 2 hours when they came to a large sheet of water. "What shall we do now?" said the boy. "We cannot get across, and there is no bridge of any sort." "Oh, here comes a boat!" cried Gretel, but she was mistaken. It was only a white duck which came swimming towards the children. "Perhaps she will help us across if we ask her," said the child, and she sung, "Little duck, do help poor Hansel and Gretel. There is not a bridge nor a boat. Will you let us sail across on your white back?" The good-natured duck came near the bank as Gretel spoke, so close indeed that Hansel could seat himself and wanted to take his little sister on his lap. But she said, "No, we shall be too heavy for the kind duck. Let her take one over at a time." The good creature did as the children wished. She carried Gretel over first, and then came back for Hansel. And then how happy the children were to find themselves in a part of the wood which they remembered quite well. And as they walked on, the more familiar it became, till at last they caught sight of their father's home. Then they began to run, and bursting into the room, threw themselves into their father's arms. Poor man, He had not had a moment's peace since the children had been left alone in the forest. He was full of joy at finding them safe and well again, and now they had nothing to fear, for their wicked stepmother was dead. But how surprised the poor woodcutter was when Gretel opened and shook her little apron to see the glittering pearls and precious stones scattered about the room, while Hansel drew handful after handful from his pockets. From this moment on, all his care and sorrow was at an end. And the father lived in happiness with his children till his death. And that was the story of Hansel and Gretel. This story is from a book called Matchbox Dreams by Douglas Swartz. In this chapter, we are introduced to Harper, Remy, and Millie. Harper, Remy, and Millie aren't your typical stuffed animals. They possess the ability to come alive in dreamland. Oh yes, dreamland is real. It exists in your mind, but it only comes alive when you are sleeping. Just like how the night is never around during the day, dreamland is only around when you are sleeping. So, what about daydreaming, you may ask? Or what about pretend play? Well, Harper, Remy, and Millie love to be with you when you are daydreaming or pretending, but they will just look and act like all your other stuffed animals and toys. The real magic begins when you go to bed. As soon as you fall asleep, Harper, Remy, and Millie, tucked into their little beds and snuggled up safe and warm by your side, wake up and begin a new adventure each night. Some experiences are so much fun, you may want to relive them again and again. Like all adventures, there needs to be a beginning. For Harper and Remy and later Millie, the beginning started a very long time ago. It was before you were born, before your mom and dad were born, and even before your grandparents were born. Harper and Remy got their start in 1900, at the turn of a new century, in a small village at the foothills of Boise, Idaho. A young toy maker named Jack wanted to create cute toys for his 3 children. His youngest, Evie, his middle child, Constance, and his oldest, Titus. With snow all around his little cabin, his wife at the sewing machine, and the children tucked in bed, Jack worked at his small workbench near the only fireplace in the cabin. Jack was sketching animals which he and his wife could make as toys and sell at the store he worked at. You see, Jack started each day working at the local toy store, stocking shelves and selling toys to children in the village. Each night, he would remember the expressions on the children's faces when they received their new toys. He used this knowledge to design what he thought would be the most desired toys in the world. Jack noticed that small stuffed animals like mice, hamsters, and puppies were the most popular toys with the children in his village. With that information, that night, he was inspired to create a couple of the cutest stuffed animals anyone had ever owned. As it got later, Jack's wife, Mrs. Drapkin, kissed Jack on the cheek, and she said she was going to sleep. Soon after, Jack started yawning from all his hard work. It didn't help that he was also really cozy in his chair near the fireplace. He soon put his head down on the workbench and fell fast asleep. In the olden times, people didn't dream unless the Sandman visited them. And for the Sandman to come to your house, everyone had to be sleeping. Unlike Santa Claus, the Sandman could not get to every home in one night. So, some nights, people just didn't dream. With everyone in the Drapkin house fast asleep and the Sandman being in Idaho, he stopped by to sprinkle dream dust on each member of the family. When he got to Jack, he looked at the cute mice Jack had drawn on his sketch pad, and he accidentally spilled dream dust on the drawings. Later that night, Jack had a most colorful dream, like the kind he used to have as a kid. He dreamt he was in dreamland, and he was being shown around by the two mice he had drawn on his sketch pad. Harper, one of the mice, came up to Jack and said, "Hi, I am Harper, and this is my sister, Remy." "Wow, you can speak," said Jack. "You look exactly like the mice I was drawing." "Well, when you were young, you probably went to our part of dreamland, and you must have seen us there and remembered us," Remy replied. "Since the Sandman spilled dream dust on our sketch, now whenever anyone sleeps near us, they can join us in dreamland, even if the Sandman didn't visit their home. Harper added, our part of dreamland is usually just for kids. But since you design toys for kids, you can enter dreamland, even though you are a grown-up. Yes, Jack said. Now I remember when I was young, I did visit dreamland. I guess now when I dream, I go somewhere else. You are correct, said Remy. Dreamland is just one part of Dream World, which has many different lands. When you sleep, you go to one of those other lands. They can be fun, but Dreamland is the nicest, safest, and most fun land in all of Dream World. Remy continued. There are no monsters, witches, or ghosts in Dreamland. There are lots of places to travel, adventures to be had, and people and animals to meet. How long have you two been living in Dreamland? Asked Jack. Well, we are not sure, said Harper. Ever since we can remember, we have been here. Time is different in Dreamland. Instead of having the past, present, and future, we can visit all 3 times, any time we want. Remy added, we would show you around, but it may be best for you to wake up now while we are fresh in your memory, so you can finish the sketches and make us into real stuffed animals. Yes, said Harper. And when you make us, please make us nice beds that we can sleep in while we travel off to Dreamland. Jack woke up. He sat up in his chair and thought to himself that his dream was one of the most real dreams he had ever had. He had forgotten what a beautiful place Dreamland was. Then he looked down at his sketches and noticed a small pile of sparkling dust on each drawing. He paused. Had it all been a dream? Or did it really happen? That night, Jack finished his sketches of Harper and Remy, and in the morning, he gave the drawings to Mrs. Drapkin, so she could make the 2 mice with her sewing machine. When Mrs. Drapkin was lighting the fire to make breakfast, she ran out of matches and was about to throw the empty matchbox in the fireplace when Jack told her to save it. He thought it was a perfect size for Harper and Remy's bed, so he asked Mrs. Drapkin for another one. All during the day while Jack was working at the toy store, he kept thinking about the dream he had the night before and about how real it seemed. When he got home, he couldn't wait to see what Mrs. Drapkin had sewn up while he was at work. Sitting on his workbench were two large matchboxes. On the outside of each box, Mrs. Drapkin had drawn 3 mice pedaling a 3-mouse-powered bicycle under the name Royal Star Brand. He slowly opened the first box to see Harper tucked snugly between his bed and blanket, smiling up at him. He opened the second box and found Remy tucked into bed, smiling too. Although Jack had left his wife detailed sketches of Harper and Remy, he was surprised at how every detail was exactly like the Harper and Remy of his dream. At dinner time, when his wife and 3 children, Evie, Constance, and Titus, were eating, he showed them Harper and Remy and told everyone about the dream he had the night before. The kids instantly fell in love with the mice and asked their dad if they could have them. Jack had planned on taking Harper and Remy to the toy store the next day to see if Mr. Lambert, the owner of the store, wanted to place an order of copies of Harper's and Remy's to sell in the store. Titus, since you are the oldest, you can pick which mouse you want to sleep with tonight, Jack said. Titus picked Harper. Constance was happy because secretly she wanted Remy anyway. Evie was too young to speak, but Jack could tell she was not happy being left out of choosing a mouse. Evie, you are too young to sleep with Harper or Remy, but when I read to all of you tonight, you can each take turns playing with the mice, said Jack. Evie, in a few days, when you turn 3 years old, you can have your own mouse. Evie seemed happy with that decision. For the first time in ages, all 3 of the children had all their chores done. Their teeth brushed, their faces washed. They were in bed even before Mrs. Drapkin had to ask them. It was the Drapkin family tradition to gather all the children together in one bed, and for Jack to tell a story each evening. Most of the time, he would make up stories based around the stuffed animals in the toy store. This evening, Jack told them about his trip to Dreamland and how he met Harper and Remy. He also told them what Remy had said.